Welcome to a special Pollinator Week Beekeeping Today podcast. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey guys! Global Patties is proud to sponsor this special Pollinator Week of Beekeeping Today podcasts. Global Patties is a family-run business that has been operating for over 17 years. They manufacture protein supplement patties for honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties made with a time-tested recipe of natural ingredients, with or without real pollen, and they also make custom patties to meet specific requests. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Global invented and made popular the sandwich patty design, which simplifies the handling process for beekeepers. Keep your bees going strong all summer long by supplementing with Global Patties. You can find out more at their website, www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, Kim. Well, this Pollinator Week series continues today with Dr. Jennifer Tsuruda from the University of Tennessee Entomology Department.
Yeah, Jeff, I don't know how familiar you are with Jennifer. She's been kind of low-key since she's been around. She was at Clemson for a while, and now she's at the University of Tennessee. Her and I have been at several meetings together. She's great at what she does. She expresses herself well. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today.
Oh, great. Well, I look forward to it. Let's call her up on Zoom. Hello, Dr. Tsuruda. Is that right? Dr. Tsuruda? Jennifer, how should I welcome you to Pollinator Week?
Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to Pollinator Week here on Beekeeping Today podcast.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's so great to be here during Pollinator Week.
Yeah, it's exciting times.
It is. I'd like to think that I should be out with my bees, but it's good to do educational programs as well. So thank you for the invitation.
Well, we won't keep you too long.
Jennifer, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
You and I have been at several meetings together recently, and that was one of the reasons that you came to mind when we started talking about Pollinator Week. Was at both of the meetings we were at, you were telling us about, I know you're involved in a whole lot of stuff, and we're going to get to a little bit of that later, but what caught my eye was the work you're doing with pollinators, pollinator gardens, all of these things. And I said, here's somebody actively involved in this. This is somebody we need to have here this week. Jennifer, what's going on where you are now?
So where I am now, I recently moved to Tennessee. So I'm trying to learn the local flora and fauna a bit more. And one of the great things is Tennessee seems to be really diverse, which is, I think, going to benefit myself as well as the bees. I do have an interest in photography, so that's going to give me an excuse to go out and spend some time with nature. So I'm learning about the area a bit, but I'm also trying to start up some new apiaries in different types of locations. So I have one on campus, and I have one also on campus land, but it's an organic farm. So it's a really kind of unique setting, and it's really nice that they're giving me access to be able to plant out there. So we have a really good partnership there. So lots of great opportunities to plant, and it feeds in with some of the programs that I'm working on. I think one of the big things to remember is that whenever we get bees, we should also think about planting forage for those bees. Oftentimes people just expect the bees to get fed by whatever's out in the environment, but we have so many new beginning beekeepers out there that our resources the slice of the pie that everyone gets is getting to be a little bit more narrow in different areas, especially more the urban areas where we have more and more beekeepers coming into those places.
You bring up a good question, Jennifer, and this is not the first time this week this has come up, and where you are is going to be different than where I am up in Ohio, where Jeff is out in Washington. How much forage do my bees need?
As much as you can provide. I don't love to see my bees turning down flowers. I think that there are some estimates out there of about an acre of consistently blooming forage for bees per hive. But I think a lot of that depends too on when you're going to get the nectar coming in. You also want to pay attention to the different types of pollen, because not all pollens are created equally. So we have the nutritional aspect where we are concerned about the amino acids that make up those proteins and those pollens. So having either really great resources that have the right profile and the 10 essential amino acids that honeybees need would be great. But oftentimes those aren't plants that are going to be blooming the entire season long. So one way we get around that a little bit is by planting some diverse forage for the.
So what, from on a spectrum of good versus bad pollen or pollinating plants, give me an example or two of a poor pollen versus a high protein pollen.
Sure. So pine pollen is a bummer for everybody, right? So part of my background is breeding bees for certain purposes. So breeding bees for resistance to varroa mites. And I keep thinking, if I could breed bees that would collect pine pollen and stack it somewhere and get it out of the air for us, I would be a millionaire.
My eyes would be very happy about that.
Yes, right? That would be a nice allergy treatment there, is just having those selectively bred bees. But of the other pollens that are more beneficial, our sweet clovers are great, mustards can be really good, canola is really good, but we don't have an extended bloom period for those. So we try to make sure that we have some variety of pollens that are available to bees. One thing I'll point out too is that we have different types of growing aesthetics at this point. So we have some folks that are planting a lot of different species of flowers in one location. And so that diversity is good, but we have a limit to where that diversity becomes functional. So if we end up with a plot that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different species, for insects like honeybees that have high floral fidelity, meaning that when they go out on a foraging trip to stay on one species of flower, if there's too much for them to have to search through, they're not going to be as efficient when they're on that foraging trip. So we like to either have things planted in blocks or not have too many things for them to have to sort through. I mean, can you imagine if your grocery store, there were no aisles of everything being sectioned and organized in a way that made sense to us, and you just found random things everywhere? It would take us forever to go to the grocery store. So in that kind of a sense, we like to make sure that we don't have too much blooming at the same time for our honeybees to have to sift through. And one thing that makes honeybees unique is that they are really good about that floral fidelity. I think I only have about 2 pictures of bees, I'm not actively looking, but about 2 pictures of bees where they have pollen loads that are mixed loads. They tend to be very pure in what they're collecting. And that's part of what makes them such great pollinators, is that when they go out on a foraging trip, they stick with the same plant. And you don't really want to have a bee that goes out and collects some pollen off of apples and then goes over to blackberries and back to apples. That's not going to do either one of those crops that much good. So it's good that they have this floral fidelity and stay on one species at a time.
Huh.
Well, that rules out monocultures then, doesn't it?
Yeah, unless it was this perfect monoculture. It's difficult to find a monoculture, especially that's being grown for human consumption, that we would recommend, per se, for our bees. And so there has been work done looking at different types of the effects of monocultures on bees. And sometimes we see a lower or decreased pollen or protein content in the hypopharyngeal glands, which of course we know are really important for making brood food to feed our developing bees. There's also been some studies showing a decrease in immune function. So it's really good to make sure we have diverse forage for our bees.
One of the things that's come up here in Ohio this year, and I don't know if you're seeing it down there or not, I haven't been following your weather, but our weather has been abysmal for farming. As a result, farmers aren't getting their corn and soybeans in, and they are beginning to look at something called prevent planting, which means I can't get in the field and put in corn and soybeans. I'm going to wait a little bit, and I'm going to put in a cover crop.
Yay for us.
Well, they're looking both ways. What kind of cover crop do I put in? And I know Ohio and Tennessee aren't the same, and Washington isn't the same, but for those of us in the Midwest who are maybe have some influence on a farmer down the road is going to look at prevent planting. And maybe I'm out of your range here, but if you were going to put a cover crop on what used to be a cornfield last year or a soybean field last year, what would you suggest? Is there, or where would I go for information to get that kind of information?
The first place you would go for local information is with your local extension office. So they'll be able to help you in terms of finding out what's best in your region. But I would say overall, regardless of what had necessarily been grown there before, these benefits of having pollinator forage and pollinator habitat have been shown in ways, and more than just the aesthetics of having something nice blooming there, but they provide the benefit of mitigating runoff and protecting against soil erosion, and also trying to conserve some of your beneficial insects that are in the area too, so that they don't just flee because there's nothing growing there. So there are benefits to making sure farmers are growing cover crops and other things in the ground so it doesn't just go barren. One of my go-tos is buckwheat because it's easy to grow, and buckwheat grows just about everywhere. I remember getting some buckwheat honey out of the Pacific Northwest one time on vacation, and might still have some of that jar left because it's not my favorite honey, but it is very distinct. So it comes in really useful for honey tastings. But yeah, we can grow it really easily here. It's fairly cheap. So I think I can buy, my local feed store, I could buy a 50-pound sack for about $40, and usually are planting at about 50 pounds per acre. So really only spending $40 for that acre. It can be a really great bloom, especially where you have a long season. It's going to die as soon as you get some kind of frost, though. So one nice thing is if I start planting it early on, I can get 2 or 3 rounds of bloom out of it within a season. So it can be really beneficial for my bees, especially if I start out even at a low seeding rate. The second round comes out even stronger, and the third round stronger after that. But I'm usually planting in areas without additional irrigation. I'm just relying upon what nature gives us. So that has a big effect in terms of what blooms overall as well.
Well, it'd be nice if some of our local farmers were putting in buckwheat. Don't know if they'll go that direction or if they're going to go with grains or grasses. The value of what you said is adding nutrients to the soil, reducing or stopping erosion, holding moisture in the soil, those sorts of things. I guess I'm glad I'm not a farmer this year, because at least here in Ohio, because it has been, I want to say we had almost 4 inches of rain this last weekend.
Wow.
And our clay soil, for the most part, doesn't do well with that much water. So, but back to what you were doing, if you were going to talk to a farmer about some crop alternatives, people who are rotating crops, we had Jonathan Lundgren on a while back, and he is a strong advocate of crop rotation and some of the conservation practices. Does your program lend itself to making those kinds of recommendations, going to work with the local agriculture community?
I'm hoping we'll get there. So I've only been here for about 4 months. So until I get an entire season under my belt, I'm going to wait upon making some recommendations. But one thing is that I am working with the organic farm where I have most of my hives, and they're really great in allowing me to plant there. So I have to buy organic seed, but that's fine too. There are benefits of being at the organic farm. So I'm planting a lot of buckwheat, and then coming in the fall, I'll follow up that buckwheat with the planting of a blend of clovers, so that come spring, the bees will have access to a lot of clover. And that benefits the farm too, because that's nitrogen fixing the soil. One thing I didn't mention either about the buckwheat is that it has other uses in terms of farming, where it's also good at preventing weed growth. So it's a natural way we can try to prevent weed growth instead of using herbicides. So reducing the amount of herbicide use, but also providing food for the bees. So it's a really nice part of this IPPM, integrated pest and pollinator management idea. So we can benefit both worlds at the same time. So win-wins are always good.
Preventing weeds is always a problem for farmers, and anything you can do to reduce herbicide use is going to be beneficial all around. So, well, for those of you out there who are working with farmers and prevent planting, keep some of this in mind. And if you know somebody down the road, maybe you can work out something with them that'll help them and you. Having 400 acres that used to be corn, now a bee plant would certainly change my season, I'm sure. So one of the other things, Jennifer, that you had going in studying pollinators and their role in pollination was actually recording the events and going on in the flowers. And you have more experience with a camera doing that than anybody I know.
Just a lot of time on my phone, that's all.
The value of that was, and you explained it in the talk that you gave that we at the meeting we were at, was there's a lot of value to just being there and taking those pictures and being able to look at them later. And explain some of that, because everybody's got a cell phone and everybody could take advantage of this for record keeping.
Sure. So I love using my phone as part of my record keeping management of my hives and of what I plant out there in terms of knowing what's flowering at any given time in the season. So I use it also as evidence to provide for beekeepers who sometimes say, oh, honeybees don't forage on what X plant. And then I'll pull out my pictures from my photo album, and if I'm good, I've already tagged the photos with different plant species names so I can look them up really easily and show them that, yes, they do forage on that. Maybe not as frequently as they would things like clover, but when resources get slimmer, they will forage on it. So I like having that documentation, not only with having photographic evidence, but then putting it into a system where you can add tags onto it and keywords so that you can easily pull them up rather than having to sift through a pile of photos within a photo album. You can just search and pull them up. The other nice thing too is if I remember to put on my location services for my phone, it'll go ahead and pinpoint where I took those pictures. So it helps me also distinguish when I'm doing my inspections to know which apiary I was attending at that time. So it can really help you remember things when you don't remember things. So I use it for after the fact of going back and checking to see what I was looking at and sorting later on. Usually when I'm out in the field, I'm in a rush to get things done. And then later on, when I'm inside air conditioning at night, then I can go through and see what I actually captured.
Are you using, when you're talking about keywording and tagging, you're doing that on the app for your photography, maybe your iPhone app or something like that, but do you use a cataloging software at home?
I don't. I probably should and could to make it even better. But right now, it's just whenever I have it in my photos album, like I use a Mac, and so it's under photos. Within there, you can key tag everything. So that's where I put things. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is that someone doesn't have to have Photoshop or Adobe Creative Suite or anything like that. It's whatever comes on your computer is available on your cell phone, whether it be iPhone or
no, you don't need anything.
Whatever the Google phone is. Pixel. Thank you. It's whatever your native software is you can do this.
And I'm pretty cheap and I'm not high techy, so if I can do it, anyone can do it. The other thing too is like there are little tricks you pick up along the way. So if you are taking a lot of macro photos, I bought on a whim like 5-10 years ago, I bought this little macro lens attachment that just clips onto my phone. And that's how I take like all of my macro photos and my videos now. I don't even use my regular like camera. So I always have my cell phone in my pocket. And so I can just pull out that little clip and just stick it on if I want to take an up close photo. It was like $15. I have now a $35 one, but I haven't even taken it out of the box yet because I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. But just $15 can make a world of wonder. And people now I give talks on photography and I'm not a photographer. It just allows you to take some really nice close-up photos. And then you pick up these other tips along the way too of if you're taking a picture of something up close and it's something that's not moving and you have a little time to adjust, setting the timer on your phone can be really valuable because these phones are really small and lightweight, and sometimes just the pressure of you pressing the button to take the photo, you move the camera, you move the entire phone and move the camera. So if it's something that's going to stay still anyway, I just set the timer and that way I can adjust and just hold the camera still for that crisp photo.
It's a nice tip. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
What else, using all of this, Jennifer, what else have you got going now that you've just moved to Tennessee? And we're going to start with the pollinator work that you're doing and the plants and the insects and move on to some of the other things you're going with bees and beekeepers. But have we missed something in your pollinator program?
Well, part of what we're trying to do with the organic farm is I'm always trying to reach out as much as possible across, trying to bridge the gap with non-beekeepers as well. So in exchange for providing me locations to plant for my bees, we have we're working on this agreement where I'm planting some flowers that aren't necessarily great for the bees, or I'm not planting them in really high density, but it also is contributing to, we're going to cut some of them as part of the vole-sustained agriculture or vole-supported agriculture. We don't have CSAs here, we have VSAs because we're Tennessee volunteers. So we have the volunteer-supported agriculture. So the cut flowers will be part of the packages that people get. And so not only will they benefit from having these nice, beautiful flowers, but this also serves as a reminder of the importance of pollinator forage And with the hopes that once the bees start visiting the flowers that are left that we didn't cull, that we're going to get seeds set and seed production. So maybe we can also give out seed packets along with that later on in the season for people to plant their own gardens at home. So we're hoping to spread the news and the importance about pollinators beyond just the beekeepers and get everybody to plant and support all different types of pollinators, not just honeybees. So that's a big part of it. And then it's just also a good example of good stewardship on the farm. So as much as at my house, I might be able to plant some pollinator-friendly plants around my yard, having acres and acres of things that are blooming at any given time is a really great attractant for my bees. So I've planted some smaller wildflower areas for some of my bees in some different locations, but the real big hit with them is having these large fields of large acreage. And the only way I can get that done, get that planted without losing an arm and a leg, is having a really good partnership with the farms that I work with. So at Clemson, I was really lucky that the fruit farm there, they needed my bees for pollination. And they recognized that for apple pollination, they need those bees middle to the end of March. And so package bees aren't going to be there in time. So they knew that they needed to help me keep my bees alive and overwintered if they wanted good pollination in the early spring. So in exchange for my pollination services, they would allow me to plant not only on some of their land, but they brought out the tractors and they did the planting for me. I just had to provide the seed. So it was a really great partnership, and we both won in that aspect where my bees were fed and stayed healthy through the year, and they had all of their pollination services done. Almost too good one year. I think we overdid it with the pollination, and they actually had to thin their apples because we had too much visitation by the bees. That wasn't a problem I had to deal with. So I was just proud of my girls.
Well, actually, all things considered, that's a practice that's being put into place with a lot of crops. Almonds specifically is what I'm thinking of, but almond growers have begun to realize that if I want bees, I got to take some role and some responsibility in providing nutrition for them before the almonds bloom. And even during almond bloom, because almonds don't bloom all day, every day. And then after bloom until the bees get moved out of there. So I would like to see that practice with a lot more kinds of growers, because it's impossible to get your bees there and out exactly at the right time. And if I've got a week delay, and that would also give me some incentive. I don't have to hurry because I've got food there for them. I don't have to rush in, pick them up, get them fed, get them moved to another location. And if I know that I don't have to rush, I'm going to be probably a little more willing to work with that grower.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than somebody who wants you out of the way because he's going to spray tomorrow night.
Yeah, there's a little more flexibility there, and a little more respectful too of you and what you need to get done.
And it would probably probably pay beekeepers this year to start talking about these things for next year for pollination contracts, but because you need a little bit of lead time from a grower's perspective. But if you want me to come back next year, how about putting in a couple acres down one side of your apple orchard there? Just till it in and get out of the way and let it grow. Let nature do what it's going to do, because it's going to help my bees. It's going to help your pollination. It's going to help your crop.
Right.
Everything's, like you said, win-win-win. So, well, that is. I certainly don't want to neglect. This isn't the only thing that you're doing at Tennessee right now, and I know that you've got a background in dealing with bees and bee problems. And are you continuing that from Clemson? What direction are you moving with bees and bee problems, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I'm 100% extension here. So a lot of my job right now is working with beekeepers and trying to promote and push practical but also responsible beekeeping. So a lot of this first season is being spent teaching master beekeeping classes, both at basic levels and advanced levels across the state. So it's a big state to cover. I wish I could offer more classes, but there's only so much time I can travel and not have my cats kill me when I get home. We are working too on training extension agents across the state. So that way, hopefully they can take over and teach the basic class and free up more of my time to teach the advanced classes and deal with more of the advanced issues that people are having across the state. So one of the big concerns, and when I interviewed, the loss rates in Tennessee were 70%. That was 2018, which is absolutely unsustainable to lose 70% of your hives. So this last year was 40%. So that's significantly better, but also pretty high. So the state apiculture, or the state apiarist, Mike Studer, did some sampling, and he thinks that this big 70% losses were mostly due to tracheal mite. So he's been pushing people to make sure that they're treating with the right medications to get rid of tracheal mites as well as varroa mites. But I think what's happening here, as well as many of the states around us that have similar beekeeping communities, is that we have a lot of beginning beekeepers that aren't necessarily taking the educational classes or getting the support as they become beekeepers. So we have a lot of some just beginners' mistakes that they're learning from as they go along. So we're constantly having to teach, which is great. We want to make sure that they feel supported and encouraged as they go on, but we're dealing with a lot of beginners' mistakes, as well as maybe some other things that are going on with mite treatment.
Tracheal mites, really?
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Wow. A lost creature almost, one would think. I have not heard of a tracheal mite outbreak in this country in quite a few years, but that may be why it happened, is because we just quit paying attention to it.
Yeah, and then also with the differences possibly in different types of mite treatments that are coming up. So a lot of people are wanting to use oxalic, which, as far as doesn't necessarily provide any treatment relief against tracheal. So that could be part of it.
Interesting. Tracheal mites. Well, it brings up the fact that how do I look for, I'm going to have to relearn how to look for tracheal mites again.
Right.
I got pretty good years ago at pulling the head off and looking at the trachea as they streamed out, and I'm going to have to get back to that, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be a new skill that you can teach the beginners to look for. Because, it's simple enough, but people just don't know to even look for it at this point.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned a master beekeeper class. What's your role in that?
So our system is a little bit different than other states. So the University of Tennessee runs the master beekeeping program in Tennessee. It's not one of these 4-level certificate types of programs. There's just a basic and advanced, and it's tied into some support from the Tennessee Department of Ag as well. So people are just basically taking this for educational purposes. They do get a certificate at the end, but it's not the same as these like EAS master beekeeping programs. So I recommend people in Tennessee, if they're interested in that type of program, to be involved in EASs, but also to take the University of Tennessee master beekeeping programs just for educational purposes, and to have something that's a little bit more regionally applicable in terms of what we're seeing, the problems that we're seeing here, addressing those. So a lot of it is some general stuff like making sure people know how to monitor for varroa mites, and making sure they know when to monitor for varroa mites, or both before and after they do a treatment, to make sure they aren't getting reinfested.
Well, just for the Tennessee people listening, Jennifer, how do I find and sign up for that class?
Wonderful. So if you go onto my departmental website, which is epp.tennessee.edu, that is where you can find for extension, and you can find the classes linked there. Or you can go ahead and contact your local extension office, and they should have links to it, as well as the Tennessee Beekeepers Association, the TBA. They have everything posted, all the flyers and links posted on their website.
And we'll make sure we get those posted on our show notes as well.
Great, that'd be wonderful. And we're hoping to do with the advanced class to have different themes for each of the advanced classes. So that way, when people want to take another class, it's not the same thing all over again, but they can pick different things at different years, different topics. And so I would love to do one on forage. We only had one advanced class actually just this last week. The other two, we didn't have enough enrollment, but it would have been really nice to do a planting session at one of these to show how we can get the large areas of forage planted, or even small habitats too, planted, and benefit the local extension office too by having increased the aesthetics of the office as well. But hopefully next year we'll be able to do some of that. Or if we have something later this late summer, early fall, maybe we can put in some clover somewhere and get a nice spring push of forage for the area bees.
That sounds good. I actually wish I was a little closer to Tennessee, but
come and visit.
Are you involved? So you're 100% extension, so you're not involved in doing a lot of research. You're taking research and applying it.
So I am still expected to do some applied research. This year, though, my focus is just trying to establish some colonies and see how they do. So I'm wondering about the 70% losses. Are my losses going to be different here versus where they were in what they were in South Carolina versus Indiana versus California? I have different places I've been, so it kind of gives me a little bit of a reference of, is this 70% management error, or is there something different going on here that I need to pay more attention to and figure out how to manage? So I'm just at this point just trying to get these colonies established and well fed and setting a good example there in terms of having that bee stewardship and having a good relationship with the farm, as well as planting forage for those bees to get them healthy going into the fall and winter. Also making sure my mites are under control. So far, so good, but it's still early. It's still early. They could jump up and surprise me at any time.
Well, good. It sounds like a good building block year for you going on down there, getting things established in place, ready for more down the road. I guess my question is, Jennifer, other than the pollination thing, what have we missed on what you've got going in Tennessee?
Well, I guess the other thing that we didn't talk about that we could talk about is the importance of integrated pest management, so that once you have pollinator forage planted, how you manage that land is really important too. So one nice thing about being at the organic farm is I don't have to worry too much, although there are some organic pesticides and insecticides, as well as other treatments that can still have negative effects on bees. But in areas that aren't under my control, that aren't my land, I'm always a little bit concerned about how the landowners are going to treat that land and whether or not they're going to give me a heads up if there's going to be an application being made. So an advantage of being in Tennessee is that we're part of Drift Watch and Bee Check, just like a lot of the states in the Midwest are. So it's a really valuable resource to have, and always reminding beekeepers that just because you're registered in the state with your apiary, you still have to separately register with Bee Check to make sure that your hives and your apiaries are on the notification list there. It's also important, not just in terms of IPM in agricultural settings, but also in terms of mosquito sprays, to have really good communication with your local mosquito control applicators so that you are notified when they are going to do an application in your area, so you can close up and move hives if necessary.
Good advice no matter where you are, I think, especially with the rain we've had this year. I imagine mosquitoes as large as robins coming up here real quick.
Yeah, North Carolina had some big ones, I think, last year. A large species, but it wasn't one that was a vector of disease. Just scared everyone with its size.
Well, not only size, but just numbers, I think.
Yes.
Definitely.
So, Jennifer, I never know when I'm looking and I get the wild hair to go check out the local garden store to try to find something that's bee friendly and good for my bees. Annuals, perennials, and I want to get a mix of good flowers. I never really, should I be looking at perennials? Should I be looking at annuals, or should I get a mix? What's the best approach for a pollinator garden?
I like mixes. If it's going to be a location where you're going to have it permanently as a pollinator plot, do a mix. That way you get your annuals blooming this year, and then your perennials, while they may have some vegetative growth the first year, the bloom years, the best bloom years are usually year 2 or year 3 or afterwards. So sometimes you don't know what's going to come up in year 2 or year 3. So you're pleasantly surprised when you see them come up, because you think, well, maybe those seeds just never will germinate, or they don't do well in my area. And so it's just this nice surprise when you end up with this beautiful plant that comes up. And that was one thing with my narrow-leaf sunflowers. I forgot all about it. And then when it came up, I wasn't sure if it was a weed or not, but fortunately I left it. And the bloom is amazing. It's like a show-stopping bloom. It's more flowers than you see any kind of foliage. So I'm so glad that I left it there. But having those blends can be really beneficial if it's an area you're leaving for pollinator forage. If it's an area that you're temporarily going to use, so if it's something on the farm that's going to be in rotation, you don't want to invest in perennials. It's going to cost you more, and it's going to be a loss for you in terms of you probably won't ever get to see those actually flower. So annuals can be really good when it's a short-term planting, or if it's an area you don't have control of long-term.
An interesting question that's kind of related to what we've been talking about here, Jennifer, is that I can walk into any farm store and find 3 or 4 mixes, and they're labeled butterfly mix, pollinator mix, and I'm looking at a bag of seed, and how as not an experienced grower can I judge the quality of that mix?
So a couple of great resources are for seed mixes or pollinator plants in general are the Xerces Society, which is xerces.org, as well as the Ladybird Johnson Wildflower Center, which is based in Tennessee, but their website is just wildflower.org. The Pollinator Partnership, which is pollinator.org. They also have great lists there too, and really great educational information on pollinator.org. Beautiful posters they come up with every year. It kind of depends upon too what your goals are. Are you trying to plant for all pollinators? Are you planting specifically for just your honeybees? Are you wanting just bees? There are different types of flowers you want for different types of insects. Or are you on a farmscaping situation where you want to attract beneficial insects so that you reduce the amount of insecticides that you're using as well? Those are all different blends, but there are some overlapping floral species that you see across all of them. And why you see some different blends for honeybees as opposed to all bees in general or pollinators in general or butterflies, a lot of it has to do with tongue length. So honeybees obviously have a much shorter tongue than what butterflies have, and theirs is long and coiled up. So they're able to access these long tubular flowers, whereas honeybees can't unless one of these larger bees cheats and makes a little hole near where the nectary is, and then they just sneak in and suck it out. They cheat the system a little bit there. So really, if you want a lot of diverse pollinators, if you want to support all of them, which I encourage people to do, you want to plant a lot of diverse forage that's a lot of different colors, that has different lengths, different sizes of flowers, different petal arrangements, so that all the different types of pollinators have access to the food. I really don't like it when I hear pollinator groups fighting with other pollinator groups talking about competition for resources. It shouldn't, I don't want to hear it that way, and I don't want it phrased that way. I think the solution is not getting rid of any specific pollinators, but that we should be planting more and more forage for all of them to coexist with one another. And there's a lot of cool research being done in areas like North Carolina State University, looking at blueberries, and you end up with the best yields and most efficient pollination when you have a diversity of bees. So we really need to work together in the pollinator field to try and promote and support all of the pollinators and not just any given one.
It's a good message. And it's kind of a prequel to our discussion later this week in the series of Pollinator Week podcasts with Adam Ellington, and where we discuss, there is the discussion about native bee versus non-native bees and what's good and what's bad, and that whole intellectual argument. And we don't answer anything, but it's good that you provide the perspective that to what is helpful for everyone.
Yeah, and that's one thing I point out too, is I don't try and escalate. I know there is some controversy there, but I try not to escalate it. And when I plant all that buckwheat for my bees and all that clover, I don't get mad when I see other pollinators come in. I'm happy that it's supporting more than just my bees. So I hope that everybody is just appreciating the pollinators that come in and visit their plantings. And for a lot of people who I think that getting into beekeeping would be so fun, but don't have the time for it at all, I always encourage them, just plant some pollinator forage, and the bees that come and visit your yard, those are your bees. You don't have to have a hive of bees in your yard. Just have some forage and appreciate the bees that come in and that you're feeding them and supporting them.
That's a great message.
What a great message for Pollinator Week, Jennifer. I couldn't have said it better.
I like it a lot.
My overall message is that we need to feed the bees so that they can continue to feed us. I think that's the bottom line, is we need to make sure that we're supporting them so that they can continue supporting us. It's a really great mutualism where we help each other.
Help each other. Wow. What a great last line, Jennifer.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Well, this is like I said, Jeff, this was going to be a lot of fun, and Jennifer's got her hands in a lot of projects, and we wish you well the rest of this year with your master beekeeper classes in your gardens, and we hope you can come back again and fill us up as you get going on other projects.
Absolutely, and I look forward to having you come down and visit.
That's a deal. You're on.
Thank you. And the invitation goes to you too, Jeff.
No, that's all right. I may take you up on that. Kim and I might just drive down from Medina one of these days.
Come on out. It's a longer flight, but come on out. Enjoy the humidity.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Well, that was really good, Kim. You said Dr. Tsuruda would be really good, and it was really a refreshing new voice in the beekeeping world to talk about pollinators on this Pollinator Week episode.
Yeah, she's got some interesting projects going, and not only in pollination and pollinators, but other aspects of her extension work. I've been with her at several meetings, and she's always both entertaining and she's got a lot of energy, and I knew she would be good here today. And she added another side to this story of Pollinator Week, and I think it was a good side to add. So I'm glad she was here. Jennifer, thank you. And Jeff, I think that about wraps this up, doesn't it?
It sure does. Well, before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. We want to thank this Pollinator Week sponsor, Global Patties. Global Patties has been manufacturing protein supplement patties for honeybees for over 17 years. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And while you're there, give them a shout out for sponsoring this great program with Dr. Jennifer Tsuruda from the University of Tennessee. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeper Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments to questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
No, I think that's about wraps it up, Jeff. Pollinator Week is winding down, and I'm going to sit back and take a deep breath and maybe catch up with everything else I haven't gotten done this week.
That's for sure. It's been a busy week. Well, very good. Thanks a lot, Kim. We'll talk to you later.
All right, Jeff. Take it easy.
All right. Bye-bye.